Continue, and where I left off, I talked about the Jeffersonian ideal. So Jeffersonian democracy isn't strictly tied up with Thomas Jefferson, the relatively elite white slave owner, intellectual, partially man of the people, but it represents the other thinkers that contributed too, such as Madison and, in my view, Tom Paine. But it coalesces around the idea of some ideas that we can relate to today. So one idea is to be very suspicious of standing armies and militarism. Jefferson tried to bring us down to like 3,000 people in the army total for the entire continental United States, something like that. He tried to bring down the Navy. Then there was a conflict that kicked off with the Barbary Coast. And then there was the War of 1812. But basically they distrusted militarism and generals and martinets who can get into mischief and try to overtly influence things. And now what we have is an economy where we have a completely unnecessary industry. The war industry is basically unnecessary. So for example, describing Russia as a threat, Russia has a 45 billion a year GDP, 45 billion a year expenditure on defense, whereas we here have I would count it at over 800 billion, but it's in that neighborhood. So they have 5% of just our military. Then you add Germany, France, England. So it's perverse. All this money could be spent better on more advanced futuristic ideas or traditional ideas, whether agriculture or construction or teaching or what have you, exploration of science and in space. There's a lot we could be doing. So, for example, recently this gravitational wave system they're planning to deploy in space is the most ambitious and largest scale system of its kind to find these almost undetectable waves. These are the kind of things we could be doing instead of spending this money to literally create things that destroy and pollute. So the point is that the Jeffersonian has a distrust of extra overt militarism, and then they have a distrust of concentration of wealth. The concentration of wealth, as we call Wall Street today, was precisely the concern of Jeffersonians. And then we move on to the idea, and here's the critical part. This is the idea of the self-sufficient household. So in a top-down system, we would be able to have free education and free health care from the federal government. And in a bottom-up system, we would be able to self-organize to solve these problems and not necessarily need to involve the federal or state governments. It could be done at the county or the municipal level, or it could even be done privately. And this is the key rub here. So, why does Alex Jones hate Bernie Sanders? Alex Jones is so insignificant compared to these philosophical questions. We'll put him at the end. But it comes down to this unity we had between left-wing oriented people looking for change and against militarism and surveillance, and right-wing oriented people that were against these various causes, wishing liberty. It was a unifying message, as Ron Paul said, and a lot of Ron Paul people have gone, and it's a real disservice to the liberty movement for Alex Jones to be calling Bernie all these names. So I think I've dispensed with most of these problems that Jones talks about, but we get to this central issue, which is what is our vision really going to look like in the future? And so I'm suggesting that if you develop, for example, a pre-kindergarten all the way to postgraduate research university as an anchor foundation for every community, that people had could be part of a co-op, so they could work part-time to extract from that system the things that they need. And they could work full-time as an anchor wage. And there are 8 of these core utility industries. So one way is we can just self-organize, and there's some baseline, which is you say you have to meet some average globally or nationally or whatsoever in order to be able to not use taxation to deliver these services. So if you self-organize education, you wouldn't need property taxes that are currently going to education because you would have self-organized. So how do we go about being able to allow people to self-organize, but essentially come in just like with the Voters' Rights Act and straighten out areas where this gets abused? So it sounds like a hot-button issue, but if we can solve that problem, you can have right libertarians, small government libertarians, and left-wing progressives and anarchists that are oriented towards social justice and egalitarian society. Now, the Jeffersonian model was an egalitarian society, so many of the tick boxes for the Jeffersonian would be amenable and even greatly synergized with a Bernie Sanders campaign, who is against concentration of wealth, which was a fundamental aspect of Jeffersonian democracy, and who is for a prosperous and educated middle class. And Jefferson did advocate for universal education. So then, and then on the issue of militarism, Sanders clearly isn't interested in spending all our money on a military buildup. That we're essentially driving global insecurity through our own military expenditures in a keep-up race. It's very dangerous right now what's going on. Saudi Arabia has sent their forces to Turkey. When you combine those two countries' militaries, they're at 80 billion GDP, but qualitatively the Saudi armed forces is not given even in the top 20 in anything I've seen. So even though they're the third largest military by expenditure after China and the US, and in some cases even the second, they aren't even considered in the top 20 militaries. But this fueling of arms into the Middle East, there have been articles written about it lately, it's extremely irresponsible. So he fits that tick box, we hope. He has made some welcome statements about Kissinger, about Libya, about not using force, about creating coalitions, that overall people have felt reassured, that especially with his long track record, that is not shown a tendency to cave, although, you know, not perfect. He is somebody who's been in politics for a long time. So it does a real disservice that Alex would say all this. So we'll get to him now. So Alex Jones doesn't recognize the fraternal revolutionary spirit that's available to unite the right and left because he sells fear and paranoia partly. He doesn't have an articulate vision other than rugged individualism and self-reliance, as far as I can tell. But I could be mistaken. I mean, maybe he's he's an Austrian economics fan, but you can't let specific approaches to solving a problem belie the fact that you have to respect people who have deep philosophical grounding in their beliefs and are focused on the right problems. And creating a relatively fair society is in all of our interests based on all international studies that a society that has real democratic access, and that's my big hope for the Sanders campaign, is that we keep this going. We sort of get used to be running over different elections to different candidates as a sort of online libertarian but idealist, populist, internet age crowd. And that we keep organized and adapt from campaign to campaign. But right now the integration should be through the Bernie Sanders system. And if he gets elected, hopefully we'll keep this whole apparatus up and running and keep running meetings and find a way to contribute to policy and run for office locally. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Alexander Hagan. Good night and good luck. And a final note on Alex Jones. I think Alex is just, if I may say so, jealous that the big revolution is coming and he can't really find a way to relate to it. Maybe jealous is the wrong word, but I wish he would join this revolution and advocate his own views on matters, which is self-organization. Self-organization to solve social problems. If you can actually do it, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to unplug from the system, and that's the question: is how do we go about doing that and make that a plank, an anarchist plank in a socialist platform, or a libertarian plank in a New Deal platform? Okay, thank you. Good night and good luck.